So self-service, when I mean self-service dashboards, what do I mean by self-service? So it's really any way to present data that's helping the end user manage their workload. And everyone that's working in the company has a goal and objective on what their job is, and so the self-service is really meant to empower individuals to be able to achieve those goals. Okay. But in all actuality, it is really all about me, the me and team. What's the benefit to me, and how can I get information out of this tool that I'm putting time in and expenses in and so forth. All right. So common dashboards that I see people using in the system are things like, what am I supposed to be working on? Okay, scheduled project work. Utilization, that's easily top 2 in the dashboards that I've seen throughout customer implementations. And other things, if you're using like vacation schedules and stuff like that, what's your current leave balance? How many days of vacation do you have left, or floating holidays or anything like that? Okay. If you're not using those features, obviously the dashboards are going to be a little harder for you to get out, but these are dashboards that they're very focused about what the individual needs to get out of the tool, what the individual is seeing, and how they're currently contributing to the company, how they're balancing and managing their own workloads in the system. Anything that can give individuals the ability to highlight to management, hey, I could use more work, or hey, I've got too much work, is a benefit, I think, and I would call that a self-service dashboard when it comes down to it. So let's get into, let's talk about the scheduled project work one. This one is good because it kind of gives you the, it factors in things like your resource scheduling, it factors in how you're tracking your projects and how you're assigning your work. So there is a lot of variation in how customers can accomplish this self-service dashboard simply by how they're using OpenAir, right? But the whole purpose of doing a dashboard or a report would be to provide a quick snapshot of here's what we've got you working on today, or here's what you should be working on today, I should say that way, and here's what's coming up in the pipeline, in the system from a planning perspective that you could be taking on next, right? This gives individuals the ability to see sort of what's coming on the horizon. If they have any personal plans or challenges, they can then talk to management saying, hey, I see you're going to put me on project XYZ. I am going to be, remember, I'm going to be out the month of January because I'm, on some kind of leave, and so therefore, if you really need to start it in January, you may need to find someone else. Okay. So when you think about building this type of dashboard, what does it mean to have upcoming work? Okay. So upcoming work is dependent completely on how are you scheduling people. Okay. So first and foremost, if you're not scheduling people, getting this kind of dashboard or report is going to be extremely difficult because you don't really have a plan, right? You're putting people on tasks, maybe tasks that are open are what they're supposed to be working on, but without any kind of a date index, you really don't have a timeline to give them. You can still give them sort of a queue, a workload queue, for example, like you have to clean up these 7 tasks. But then you also have to give them some kind of priority, perhaps, that says, this one is more important than the second one if you don't have a timeline. Okay. Quite a few customers using OpenAir do use timeline aspects, the scheduling features in OpenAir. Though there's 2 main scheduling features in OpenAir. One is embedded within the project itself called task assignments. The dates on the task drive when you expect the work to get done. The second is bookings, and bookings can vary from I just need you on this project during this time frame to I need you to actually deliver this task on this date. So you can actually book to the task level, which would give you that information. Okay. So depending on how the scheduling is working in the system, that will drive sort of the core, the basis for being able to build this self-service dashboard. Okay. Unfortunately, the other part of it is, so now you are doing scheduling in the system, but how accurate is the system, is the information? How up-to-date is the information? Because there's nothing worse than sharing information and knowing that the information is a month old, is 2 weeks old. It's not current, because if you can't trust the data, then the self-service dashboard, of course, will not be very useful for the individuals that it's intended to. So here you end up having to drive some compliance, some auditing, making sure there's some kind of recurring activity going on to make sure the data is up to date. Because the thing that I'm going to show you in the system about the dashboards and the reports is they are real time, and they refresh on a daily basis. So it's pulling the data as is. It doesn't save it, and not show anything for 2 weeks. It'll show whatever in the system right now. So we want to make sure that the data is up to date, so there's not a lot of confusion about what the workload's going to be. Okay. And the last one, and this is a bit of a tip and trick type thing, is do you have something called a self-view filter set, right? So filter sets, if you're not familiar with the concept, filter sets are how you control data views in OpenAir. So when you log into the OpenAir system, you yourself have access to certain customers, users, projects, stages, so forth. And all of that's controlled by a filter set. For those of you who are administrators or people like directors and so, you may end up having a filter set called All Access, which is really just let me see everything, right? But to individuals working in a self-service mode, they tend to have something called like booked assigned, or only they're given a data view that says, show me only the projects and the information that pertain to me. Like I have some relationship to them. I'm assigned to work on this project, therefore I can see this project. If I'm not assigned to it, I can't see it. Okay. This basically gives people a very focused data set to be able to look at in the system. But a self-view filter set is really specifically meant to say, I can only see me. I only see me in the system. And so if I'm looking at anything related to me, I can see me. And there's a trick that you can do on reporting that gives you the ability to set up a report and hard code the report to always be a me report. You don't have to add all kinds of filtering, and you have 50 people in the company, so you don't have to say 50 versions of the report filtered by their name. What you use is you use a self-view filter set. So you go into your filter set area and you set up this filter set, and you'll notice it looks very redundant over here in the screenshot, but there's one key setting. User access is set up to myself, and that is it. So if I go inside OpenAir, oops, administration, oops. When I go into the administration area of the system and I click on filter set, I have something called report self-view. In this filter set, I can see everything except I can only see users, which mean myself. I can only see myself from a user aspect of it. Okay. So when you have this filter set up, you can actually, when you create a report and set the filter set on the report to be report self-view, the one that I've named report self-view. Okay. In the settings area over here, I've hard-coded this to be, this report uses the report filter set, report self-view. So this is a little trick. If you don't see this drop-down on your report configuration in OpenAir, so on summary reports, it's at the bottom of the list, or on detail reports, it's in the other section. If you don't see this option available, what that means is you don't have an internal switch in place called enable filter sets to be associated with reports. Okay? When you have this option set up, administrators, of course, have access to this feature, but then you have to also be given permission in your role. So if you're not an administrator, say you're a project manager role or a timesheet user role or something, if you need the ability to set this value on a report, you need your role to support the ability to enable filter sets. So if I go to administration, and you can see in the roles area here, I'll pick my project administration. Oops, I just passed it. So specify report filter sets. Okay, this is a role-based control if you're not an administrator. So by having those two set up in the system, you can actually set up reports. And of course, the topic today is self-view, but you can set up reports that are hard-coded with any view. You can hard-code it to all access. You can hard-code it to project manager view only. And then whatever controls you need to have, the report would own the data view. So even though I have the ability to see everything in the system, if I ran this report with the self-view filter set, it would only show me on the results. Okay. So let's continue on with our scheduled project work dashboard creation, right? So how do you build it out? So here's the steps that I would typically take to build out this kind of request in the OpenAir environment. I would start off with a user-based summary report, okay? And there's a reason for that. The summary reports in OpenAir or cross-tabbed if you're using the management interface provide color coding. And the color coding can also be color-coded with a suppressing color coding at the subtotal level, right? And to be able to get the color coding only at the user row, I have to start with the user report. So I can add some color coding because I want to be able to see sort of how many hours people are scheduled to work, and so I have some color coding to see whether they're going to be over-scheduled. I add the projects that they're supposed to be working on. Could potentially add the tasks as well. That's completely, so whatever you'd like to see, or the client. And then I set up the time period for how far in the future can I provide this information to the user, right? How far is it accurate? So 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I typically see about 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. You add the color coding in there, and then you set the filter set to self-view, share the report with everyone, and now you can create a dashboard. Okay. So let's take a look. I've actually created this in our own environment here. This is my production environment. So I have a report called Resources Booked Busy next 15 weeks. If I take a look at how I've built this out, you can see I have users and projects. It's an account-wide user report. I'm going to user then project. I've had all booked hours. Bookings are my method of scheduling. And I've taken it from this week forward 15 weeks as far as the schedule is concerned. And I've also added some color coding. So if I go down to my color coding area here in the configurations, sorry to make you dizzy. I can click on this color coding. You see I've got some time ranges in here. Since I'm dealing with weekly, I'm dealing with a 40-hour time frame, so I want to color code for that. And I want to suppress it on the subtotal, which means on the project rows, I'm going to not have color coding, but on the user rows I will. And if I run it from here, this is where you share the report. People could run it, and they would get the results back to see, oh, how busy everyone is. Okay. But this has been hard-coded to me, so it's only showing for me in the system, right? And the results for me in the system and the color coding here. Now, once I have this report, I can actually put it on a dashboard. This is the home module for many of you. Mine says dashboard. And I could go to my self-service area, and I can create what's called a report, right? So it's not a chart. It's actually a report. And by configuring this report option, I can pick that same report and have it pull into here and show me the same information. Now, one big thing that you'll notice different is the color coding still spills down into the subtotal rows. So that's a little bit of a conflict right there. But you can see that I am getting the color coding across that I want. I'm seeing information by project, and these are the weeks. If I need to open it up, these are the next few weeks that I can take a look at in the report. Okay. If I happen to want to use this from a filtering perspective, I can say, give me all my business efficiency projects, and these are the 3 that are going to come up. Okay. Now, let's talk about utilization, because this is also a very popular one because utilization is based on sort of a time entry. And, of course, you could also do forecast utilization, but in this example, I'm going to use what time have I put in and how much have I achieved from my billable target. Okay. So if you have some kind of bonus plan or targets or something like that in the system, a chart is a very helpful way to have people see how they're progressing against their goal on a monthly or a quarterly basis. Now, in this case, you do have to understand if you are measuring it against the target, how are you capturing that target? So there is a standard functionality in OpenAir called target utilization. It's an optional feature that you can turn on. It gives you a table on the user record where you can set the date and the utilization target they should be hitting, and that target is a percentage. So if you say 75%, it looks at your work schedule and says 75% of those work schedule hours is what your target is. Okay. Some companies implemented this type of utilization before the target utilization feature was available in OpenAir, for example, so they have custom fields set up. Either way, somewhere the number has to be captured some way, so how do I know what the target is to be able to pull it into a report? The other way, the other dependency is, okay, so I want to see targets and the achievement toward targets. So what does achievement mean? Well, how do I tag the hours that people are putting on a time sheet? Do I use things like task type? Is it everything in the project stages other than internal? Am I using service or SKU or part number, whatever you've renamed that to? Is it a custom field on projects? It could be a number of things. We quite often see task type or work with customers on task type, but it could be a number of things. And those are ways that you're basically saying hours against these types of projects or these types of tasks are the types of hours that I want to report on. Okay. And then, of course, the self-view filter set, same concept here. So how do you build it out? So first and foremost, getting a target hours value is really being able to pull that however you've turned on. If you've turned on target utilization, that's a standard field in the OpenAir system that you can pull called target hours. If you have it on a custom field, that's obviously a field that you can pull onto the report. Okay? But when it comes to representing what does it mean to have billable utilization, billable hours, right? You actually may need to create your own reporting value for this because you've tagged the data in a way that you need to be able to tell the system, I consider this hour a billable hour because the task type is billable, or the service is consulting, or it's in a stage called active, right? The project's in a stage called active. So you create custom calculations in the system, and those custom calculations become available to pull onto the reports. So you start with a company or a user-based summary report. You put the user in there because, of course, we're dealing with people, right? Self-view, so people as a subtotal. And then you want to span out the time period that you're looking at. I would recommend it be a single period, but I've worked with customers where they want to look historically, how did I do over the last 3 quarters? How did I do over the last 2 months? But at a very basic level, how am I doing this month against my target, or this quarter against my target? In order for the dashboard to show comparison of target to actual, you need to be able to pull a target value in plus all the additional utilization values that you want to pull in. Okay? And quite honestly, I've seen a lot of customers where they'll do target hours and they do billable, but then there's also this sort of credited or productive or billability or different terms, but it's things that you want to grant people utilization credit for because it's helping the company even though it's not translating directly into money. And that's how a lot of bonuses are based on, for like a credited or a bonus type calculation. So when you set this report up, of course, you put the self-view on there, and now you can create a multi-bar chart. And now the multi-bar gives you that sort of achievement view in the system, something like, let's go back in the system, something like this. Okay? So let me just take you behind the scenes a little bit about these reporting values, because billable hours approved and bonus hours approved are something that I created in my environment. Right? So how did I create those in the system? And that's using something called the custom calculation feature. So under administration, custom calculations, administrators, of course, have access to this. It's a role-based permission in the system to be able to create or edit these things. Right? But what it allows you to do is to basically put simple math into OpenAir to say, this is a new reporting value, and this is how I figure it out. Here's how I compute it. Okay. The other part of this custom calculation, though, besides simple math, is the ability to have it pre-filtered on specific data. So this is where I said we have to understand how the data is tagged so that we could create a value that already knows what billable means. So in my environment, task type is a control, and I'm pulling everything for billable and as a precaution with no task type. So I'll make sure everything's billable. So when I have the task set up with that task type and the time is put on the timesheet, that timesheet is tagged with task type. So now I have an ability to say, give me all the time that's got task type of billable. Okay. So I go to create the custom calculation, but I have one challenge. I want approved hours filtered by something, but I don't have an equation. So I need to have an equation. So I have something, this is where we go back to what we learned in second and third grade. So something times 1 is something. Something minus 0 is something, right? So do a very simple math equation to tell OpenAir, yeah, I still want you to compute this, but now I can give it a name called billable hours, and I can filter it. And now I have a completely new reporting value that I can pull onto report. And because of that, now I have the ability to include reporting values and have them show up in a dashboard in comparison to where am I at against my goal. Okay. So I have a base target hours value here, billable hours and bonus hours to date, and today's February 9th, so achievement of my goal is on its way, but not necessarily, as it gets closer to the end of the month, I'll be able to tell whether I'm going to make it or not. Okay. Other variations of this could be things like, what is your booked utilization for the month? So you can compare, am I actually scheduled to do enough to reach my goal versus what am I actually doing in the system? Right. I should point out one other thing on the dashboard. When you do look at things on the dashboard, so it's very easy to see sort of a flat slide set that said, oh, isn't this a great graph? But the thing to highlight in the OpenAir environment is when you're looking at a dashboard in real life, if you hover over any of the bars, it gives you more details about the information. Okay. And if you're trying to compare things and you really just want A and B, not A, B, and C, if you click on any of these values, you can turn them on and turn them off and see the information in different formats. Okay, so the benefit of the self-service dashboards are expanded if you're able to give that information to them directly in the OpenAir environment. So now the key is I've set up the report, I've set up the dashboards. How do I get that in everyone's hands? And to be able to do this, you have to basically share it with everyone and push it out to everyone. It's sort of a two-step process. So the first step is share the report with everyone you want to share the report with. So the share option on the reports that you own. And then if you're familiar with it, there's a bulk user wizard. It's in the home module under the wizards tile. And a person who has the ability to edit users has access to this. You basically set the dashboards up on a person and then use the dashboard copy option to push those dashboards out to everyone. People who have access to the report will get the dashboard. If they can't see the report, they won't get the dashboard. So it's two pieces. You have to make sure both pieces of the puzzle are taken care of. Right. So some tips and tricks when you're doing this. As a user in the system, and even as I was bringing you into my environment, you can see I have lots of dashboards that I've created to help run the organization. When you're setting up a self-service dashboard, the last thing you want to do is push all of this other stuff to everyone. You really just want the self-service dashboard. So my recommendation would be to actually set up, take a person who doesn't have any dashboards or a temporary user account that doesn't have any dashboards and use that as your template. Set up the dashboards on that person and then use that person as my copy from on the user wizard. And that way you can push it to everyone that way. Okay. I'd also do a test copy. Push it out to one person and make sure when Proxy and them see it and make sure it looks like it's showing up correctly. I also recommend setting up a folder where you're putting all of these self-service reports into, because the key is, remember, we want to make sure that filter set on the report is set up to self-view. So it's easy to maintain if it's in a folder by itself, organized in a way that you know these are all the ones that are driving the self-view, the self-service dashboards at the end of the day. And when you have it in a folder, now simply all you have to do is share the whole folder with everyone. You don't have to share report by report if you don't want. And that way you ensure that the sharing happens as you push the dashboards out to everyone. So hopefully this has given you some ideas of how to sort of go about setting up a self-service dashboard, things to consider, and then more of the mechanics of how do I get that into everyone else's hands. And the focus should be make sure that you're focusing on what will benefit them, what do they need to measure against, what do they need to be compliant with, and provide the information in a format that they can see very easily on a dashboard wherever possible. Okay. And that way they'll be able to go to their dashboard, interact with the data as they need to, and then be able to achieve their objectives and their workload in the environment.